This is the latest edition of Front Up, and I'm Whitey Willauer, and I've got a great guest today, Peter Swenson. Peter, how are you today?
Good, Whitey. Thanks. Thanks for having me here.
Now, what are you in charge of right now?
Well, not very much, actually, to be honest with you. I'm still the director of Family and Children's Services on Nantucket.
Yeah.
And we provide, mental health services and counseling and alcohol and other drug services to people on the island from ages. I think our youngest person that comes to see us is 4 years old.
Really?
And we've got people up in their, I think we've got somebody in their 80s. So all across the spectrum.
And have you always been Family and Children's, or you had other names?
Well, legally, it's always been Family and Children's Services. It's legally incorporated as Family and Children's Services, but it, as many things happen to evolve throughout life, it became Nantucket Behavioral Health Services. It actually was the Counseling Center at one point, but we're focused on Family and Children's Services in Nantucket. That's the legal incorporated name, but it's also the kind of work that we do most is working with families and people in families, trying to help them negotiate some of the difficulties that they've found in their life.
Now, do you work with the high school and the hospital? What are the relationships there?
Well, because we're the licensed mental health clinic on the island for the state, we work with anybody that refers to us. So we have relationships with the high school and with the different schools on the island, and also with the hospital, where we do provide support and services as requested. We have the emergency services contract for the state for anybody that has mass health insurance or for no insurance. The hospital would call our staff and we would go in and do emergency evaluations and things like that through the emergency room at the hospital.
So do you work with the emergency room when people come in?
Yeah, somebody comes in and they're in some kind of a distress, whether it's a mental health problem, alcohol or drug-induced problem. If they have state insurance, Mass Health, or one of the subsidiaries of Mass Health, or they are uninsured, they would call us. One of our clinicians then goes into the hospital and works with them to try and find the most appropriate level of care for them and make the appropriate referral. It could be anything from acute intoxication, which we then have to wait until they're sober enough to be able to work with them, to suicide risk, to any kind of a mental health crisis, anxiety disorder, something along those lines.
And now, how about the relationships with the high school or the public schools? What happens there?
Well, right now, the neat thing about the school system on Nantucket right now is that they have school social workers. They've hired their own school social workers there, which I think is a great thing within the community, that the school has its own people that work for them. And we do provide counseling and things like that for people on a as-needs basis. Those clients of ours who come to see us that are at school, sometimes we'll go to the school and see them, and we'll work with the school in order to make it possible to do that. We also have a contract for a program called Children's Behavioral Health Initiative, which is a really exciting program that was put together by the state, where we will work with families and go into the homes and work with the families at home in their location, and makes it a little bit easier for them. And through that, we do a lot of work with children in the school system there in any number of ways, in a traditional social work case management kind of a program. And that's been a very successful program. Part of what we've done with that also is we've developed a Hispanic component to that, where we have people who are bilingual and bicultural that can work with the Spanish population and deal with some of those needs. And when we started doing that, the demand for that service just exploded, and we found a tremendous amount of need in that community that we've been really reaching out to and helping. And I think that's been a real success in the last year. One of the things that we're the most pleased with is how well that's worked in that program.
Are these people able to pay for your services, the Latinos?
Yeah, actually, the Latino population that we have on island that come to see us, they do whatever they have to do, and they usually, the CBHI program is a state-funded program, and it's through Mass Health. Mass Behavioral Health Partnership is actually the group that oversees that and runs that, so it's an insurance-based program, and that program itself has been outstanding in its payment and how that gets covered. And the Latino population that we have in there participate through their insurance, and that's been very successful.
Is there a different way besides language that you deal with the Latino community? Is there, rather than the English-speaking community, is there any differences that you can point to?
Well, the interesting thing about this particular program is that it's designed to go and work with the family in their homes, which in some ways has been more well received and more openly received by the Latino population. And there's been a real connection to extended family and work within the family in that way, and it's been a little bit more. They've been more receptive at the beginning of the program. That's not to say that that our regular population here on Nantucket, the generational population here on Nantucket hasn't been receptive. It was just a little bit different than what they were used to. And so, now that we've gotten in the habit of providing that service more regularly, I think that people are really more open to that. But the Hispanic population, the Latino population took to that pretty quickly.
Now, how many patients do you actually see during a year?
Well, it depends on the year, what's happening in the community. It also depends on what the economy looks like and that kind of stuff. But we see anywhere between 5,000 to 9,000 people throughout a year, depending on what the year is and what's happening in that year.
Now, what do you see as the biggest problems on Nantucket now? As far as is it drugs? Is it alcohol? Is it other problems?
Well, as always, the number one problem, I think, in any community is alcohol. Alcohol is the number one problem. It's connected to most of the different social problems that we have throughout our community. So typically in any community, alcohol is the number one problem. And that would be consistent here on Nantucket, that's the biggest problem that we see on the island.
How about marijuana? Is that a big problem?
Well, it is to some degree with kids and with stuff like that. We see a lot of pot use with high school. We get some adults using it, but again, it doesn't really compare to alcohol. A lot of people want to say that the prescription drugs, that's the big problem, or for a while it was cocaine was the big problem, or heroin's the big problem. It's not to say that those aren't problems and that they're not serious problems. But alcohol, by and far, is the most significant public health problem in our community and in most communities that you find.
Now, do you work with the other groups around town, like the Safe Place and other organizations such as that? Well,
we'll work collaboratively with them as needs be. If they have a client that needs mental health services or addiction services, we'll work with them. If we have a client that has sexual assault or something along those lines, we'll refer back to Safe Place and have them work with them. So we've got a real good understanding of what each agency does, and we try and help each other as best we can.
Another thing that people have been asking me about lately is the fact that the sober house I hear is shutting down. What's happening there?
Well, actually, we're working to transfer the sober house to Housing Nantucket. Hopefully, that's where it will go, so it'll remain in the affordable housing stock on the island. Part of the issue that we had with that is that we didn't have the demand necessary with the number of people that were in there that were able to pay any kind of rent to be able to stay there. Part of a sober house is that it be self-sufficient and pay for itself. And we were, and maybe it's a function of the economy or what have you, but we weren't getting people that were able to pay any kind of a rent there. And then eventually we started getting to a situation where we really weren't having anybody apply for the sober house. They would come out and take a look at it. They'd look at the economy. They'd look at job prospects and stuff like that. And people would choose to move off island rather than to come and stay at the sober house and try and find work there.
Insurance problem in the United States with the presidential Republican campaign has taken front and center. How has that impacted you? I mean, what are your feelings on that?
Well, the insurance industry is it's a very difficult nut to crack. I will say that, in an organization like ours, we spend an inordinate amount of time just trying to get insurance companies to pay bills that they've agreed with their clients that they will pay. The insurance company spends an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out how not to pay bills, so there's a huge game that goes on. And I think that from our perspective, that's the biggest problem that we see in the healthcare industry is the insurance industry, and how do you work with that and the multiple different ways that insurance companies, interpret themselves. With one company, you can have 15 different plans, and each different plan funds at a different level, and each different level has different ways that they'll pay for something, and that's just one company. And then you move to another company, and it's just amazing how much you have to try and do to stay level with the insurance companies. They change the rules on every other month. You get a new set of rules from the insurance company. You can do this now, you can't do that. You have to bill with this form, and this this number now has to be moved to that number, and it's really turned into a game with the insurance companies trying to figure out how you pay for it. I don't know what the solution is, but there's got to be a better way of doing it than the current system that we have with the insurance companies, that convoluted and that difficult to work with.
Is it a Massachusetts problem, or is it a nationwide problem?
Oh, it's a nationwide problem. I mean, we live in Massachusetts, so we're all going to say, oh, it's our problem here in this state, and our system's the one that doesn't work. But we get people that come from all over the country because we're a destination location, and the insurance company is just as convoluted and messed up in any other state as is here.
That's right. You during the summer you get, you get people from New York.
New York's just as confusing as Minnesota, as Ohio, as Massachusetts. The whole thing is really just
Now, if you've got 22 employees, where do they come from? I can't imagine that they are homegrown.
Well, a lot of them are from the island, grew up on the island, and are connected to us in some way or another from the island. We also have people that have married somebody and moved to the island to come onto the island to live here, that become a part of our staff. I think we've only have one person that we hired from off island who has now become a resident here on island, that's been here for the last 6 years. We have hired people that have moved to the island with a spouse, and their spouse moved to the island, they live here, and then we've hired them. So there's a variety of different things. We have people that have been on the island for a long time. One of our office assistants is lifetime, grew up on the island. So we have a lot of different people that come from different backgrounds. We have people that have been here for 10 years, people have been here for 3 years, people have been here for 6 years, and then, lifetime people that have been here for their whole life.
One last question that I'd like to ask, and that is, we're a small little community. Everybody knows everything about everybody else. How does that impact how you accomplish your mission?
Well, it just makes issues around confidentiality more difficult to deal with. And also, you have to work with staff to help them to understand that, when you're in Stop and Shop and somebody walks up to you, you're not necessarily working, you're off. That can be difficult because, as a person in need, you see the person who's supposed to be helping you, and they may be off duty. It's kind of hard not to go up and ask them. So you have to be careful around that, because if you start talking to them in Stop and Shop or at the bookstore or something like that, you could be breaking confidentiality. So that's a difficult issue for people to learn and to understand. That can be a real challenge in a small community like Nantucket.
Well, Peter, it's been great having you on here again, and I hope you'll be back and be able to tell us more about what you've been doing. And thank you very much for serving the community so well.
Well, thank you for having me again, Whitey. Thank you.